when a teenage girl nervously knocks on her neighbor's door and stammers about a dire situation at home, the neighbor almost dismisses it as yet another teenage exaggeration. But one chilling detail she reveals changes everything, plunging them both into a harrowing fight against time. Before we dive into this story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe in the power of courage, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Ned Palmer stands at the threshold of his cozy house on Oakwood Lane, staring in shock at Samantha, the shy foster child who lives next door with Mike and Lauren White. The Whites had moved onto the street roughly a year ago, but from Ned's vantage, they seemed pleasant enough. Well-kept yard, polite conversations about the weather, and that perpetual wave whenever they saw Ned pruning his hydrangeas. He'd had scant reason to suspect anything was amiss, apart from Samantha's withdrawn demeanor. He'd notice her sometimes on the sidewalk, shoulders tense and gaze downward, as though always expecting someone to reprimand her. Ned had chalked it up to teenage moodiness, but now, face to face with her, he can't ignore the stark fear etched across her features. Her left forearm sports a fresh bruise, large and purplish blue. She tries to hide it at first, tugging down her sweater sleeve, but she can't hide her trembling voice. "Please," she says, nearly choking on the words. I didn't know where else to go." She glances over her shoulder, as if terrified someone might emerge from the shadows. "I can't stay there anymore." Ned, a soft-spoken man in his early 60s with gentle eyes and a kind, wrinkled face, ushers her inside at once. He offers her a seat on his worn couch, brown upholstery that had seen better days but remains comfortable enough. The living room is cluttered with old postcards and souvenirs from Ned's time in the Navy, a half-built model ship on the coffee table, and a crocheted blanket draped over the armchair. Samantha looks small, dwarfed by the couch. Her gaze darts around in half-panic. Ned hurries into the kitchen to fetch her a glass of water. His heart thuds in his chest as he fills it, hands trembling slightly. He doesn't want to jump to conclusions, but the bruise looks recent, and she is clearly afraid. He returns and hands her the glass, settling onto the chair across from her. She sips once, then sets it down with shaky hands. "Thank you," she says, almost too quietly to hear. Ned's mind whirls. "Tell me what's going on," he urges gently, mindful not to push too hard. "Did something happen with Mike or Lauren?" She blinks back tears and simply nods. Her hair is lank, in need of a proper wash and comb, and she's wearing a faded sweatshirt that might have originally been pink but now leans grayish. He notices how thin she looks. Guilt stabs him. He should have paid more attention. He should have realized something was off when she'd sometimes rummage through his trash cans looking for old magazines, or on the few occasions she asked him for a glass of water while she was out walking the dog, a dog he never actually saw. Samantha swallows, her voice barely above a whisper. "They hurt me. They do it every time I speak up or if I try to. They call it discipline, but it's not. They lock me in the basement sometimes and they don't let me eat with them." She rubs her arms, wincing as she touches the bruise. "I don't know what to do anymore." Ned's pulse pounds in his ears. He's no stranger to the concept of child abuse, having once volunteered at a youth center where he heard horror stories, but he never imagined such a thing happening next door. "Have you called anyone?" he asks, voice tight with concern. "A hotline or the police?" She shakes her head rapidly. "They took my phone away. And even if I got it back, I don't know if anyone would believe me. Mike has everyone convinced I'm just a troubled foster kid." Ned's jaw sets. "Listen, you're safe with me right now," he says, struggling to maintain composure. "We'll figure this out. We can call the police, and they'll get Child Protective Services involved." Samantha stiffens. "Please, don't let them take me back to the Whites." Her voice cracks under the weight of her fear. "They'll punish me worse if they find out I told." Ned's chest aches at her desperation. He pats her hand, thinking hard. "Stay here for now," he says. "I'm going to make a phone call. You just breathe, all right? No one's going to hurt you here." He stands, rummaging through the living room to find his phone, which he'd left on the kitchen counter. He dials the local police station, the same station that handled traffic stops and neighborly disputes. As he relays Samantha's story, his voice trembles with anger and fear. The dispatcher assures him they'll send officers over to investigate. It's the only step Ned knows to take. He returns to Samantha and tries to offer some comfort, but she's trembling so fiercely he can almost feel her panic in the air. Not 15 minutes later, a police cruiser rolls up to Ned's driveway, its lights flashing muted red and blue against the twilight sky. Two officers emerge, Officer Grace, a middle-aged woman with a lined face and kind eyes, and Officer Mitchell, a younger man who looks a bit hesitant but professional enough. They approach, ask to come inside, and Ned leads them into the living room, where Samantha still sits hunched on the couch. The setting sun casts the last rays of light through the lace curtains. Samantha looks at the floor, clearly terrified. Grace kneels in front of her, speaking in a soft tone. "Sweetheart, can you tell me what happened?" In fits and starts, Samantha recounts how Mike and Lauren White have been punishing her in ways that go far beyond regular discipline. She describes the nights locked in the basement, the rationed meals, the nasty comments Lauren makes about her being worthless. Grace's expression tightens visibly. She asks Samantha to show them the bruises, and Samantha lifts her sleeve with trembling hands. The bruise is dark, stark evidence of violence. But Officer Mitchell shifts uncomfortably, exchanging glances with Grace. Grace sighs, stands, and turns to Ned. "We're going to have to go next door to talk with the Whites," she says. "If it's okay, we'd like Samantha to come too, so we can get both sides of the story." Ned bristles at the suggestion that Samantha should set foot there again, but he also understands that the police want to see how the Whites react. However, before Ned can respond, another car pulls up. Ned peers out the window and sees Mike White stepping out of his SUV, gawking at the police cruiser in front of Ned's house. Lauren emerges from the passenger side, carrying a grocery bag. Their expressions darken when they spot Samantha's face through Ned's window. Officer Grace and Officer Mitchell step outside. Ned and Samantha follow, though Samantha keeps herself half hidden behind Ned. Mike and Lauren approach, both wearing carefully orchestrated expressions of concern and confusion. "What's all this?" Mike demands, glancing at Samantha. "Samantha, what did you do now?" His tone might seem fatherly concern to an outsider, but to Ned's ears, it's dripping with threat. Grace holds up a hand. "We've received a report of potential abuse in this household. We're here to investigate. Samantha, you have the right to speak freely." Samantha's eyes fill with tears. She clutches Ned's sleeve. Lauren steps forward, adopting a soothing voice. "Officers, I don't know what she's told you, but Samantha is a troubled girl. We've been trying so hard to help her, but she keeps acting out. Look, if you want to come in and see our home, you're welcome." She glances at Ned with a thin-lipped smile. "I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding, Ned. We do appreciate your concern." Mike feigns a hurt expression. "Samantha, come on," he says. "You know we've never laid a hand on you. Why would you tell such awful lies?" He even adopts a paternal tone, as though heartbreak is swirling in his throat. Samantha's grip tightens on Ned's arm, her knuckles white. She tries to speak, but no words come out. Ned sees the conflict raging in her eyes, the terror of retribution if she continues to speak, versus the desperate hope that the police might actually save her. Officer Mitchell quietly suggests they all move inside the Whites' home to talk. Ned, worried but determined to stay by Samantha's side, follows the group. The Whites' living room is pristine, plush gray carpet, tasteful modern furniture, and not a speck of dust in sight. Family photos line the mantel, mostly featuring Mike and Lauren smiling in front of scenic landscapes or with older relatives, but few featuring Samantha. The house smells of air freshener and faint lavender candles, an almost jarring contrast to the tension in the air. Samantha stands near the doorway while Mike and Lauren seat themselves on a love seat, hands clasped. They spin their narrative about Samantha's alleged behavioral problems. She's a pathological liar, starved for attention, and always inventing tales of abuse. Lauren dabs her eyes with a tissue, painting herself the victim of a teen's rebellious streak. To the officers, it could easily come off as plausible, especially given the neatness of the house and the Whites' calm demeanor. Officer Grace tries to coax details out of Samantha, but each time Samantha attempts to speak, Mike or Lauren interrupts with some version of, "That's not true, dear," or "She's exaggerating, officer." They never directly accuse Ned of meddling, but they keep glancing at him pointedly. Finally, Ned can no longer hold back. "Look," he says, his tone firm. "She's got bruises on her arm. That didn't just come from nowhere. She's clearly scared." Lauren leans forward, adopting a sorrowful expression. "She stumbled this morning. Hit her arm on the kitchen counter. We tried to ice it, but she ran out to the neighbor's place, claiming we hurt her." She looks to Samantha. "Sweetheart, you know that's what happened?" Samantha's eyes brim with tears. She's unable to form a coherent retort under the pressure of Mike and Lauren's united facade. Officer Grace steps out to speak with her partner in hushed tones. They glance at Ned apologetically, as if to say they can't remove Samantha without substantial proof. So far, there's only her word, bruises that could be explained away, and the White's calm denial. Lauren and Mike have done this dance before. It seems they're skilled at feigning innocence. Officer Mitchell eventually clears his throat. "We'll file a report and forward it to Child Protective Services," he says. "But as of now, there's insufficient evidence for an arrest. We'd advise everyone to remain calm, and Samantha, if you feel unsafe at any moment, call 911. Samantha's face twists in despair. "I can't," she begins, but Mike cuts in. "Of course she can call if there's real danger," he says smoothly. "We're not monsters, officer." Ned bristles, suspecting any phone call Samantha tries to make would be immediately discovered. Yet under the watchful eyes of the officers, there's little he can do but protest. Isn't there a way for her to at least stay somewhere else tonight? She's clearly terrified. Officer Grace looks torn. "Without conclusive evidence, we can't forcibly remove her. That's up to CPS. They'll investigate, interview all parties, and make a determination. We're sorry." Ned's heart pounds with anger and concern. Meanwhile, Samantha is trembling, tears rolling down her cheeks. Lauren places a gentle hand on her shoulder, a gesture that might seem motherly but feels utterly chilling to Ned. The hypocrisy is nauseating. With the situation at an impasse, the officers leave, reassuring Ned that they'll expedite the report. Ned watches in helpless frustration as Samantha is effectively left in the care of her alleged abusers once again. Before the police pull away, Samantha glances at him with such a look of pleading that he nearly shouts at the officers to do more. But the law requires evidence. The cruiser disappears into the night, leaving the entire street in a surreal hush. Ned trudges back to his home, a weight of guilt and panic pressing on his chest. He paces in his living room, phone in hand, wondering what else he can do. He considers calling social services himself, but he suspects they'll echo the police's stance. Maybe he can call lawyers, but that would require money and direct involvement that Samantha might not be ready for. The system is set up so that a single claim, even with bruises, might be dismissed if the foster parents seem nice and stable. The telephone rings, startling him. He lunges for it, hoping it's the police with new information, or maybe a friend with advice. But it's only his niece checking in from out of state. He mumbles a quick apology, promising to call her back tomorrow. Right now, he can't think of anything except the plight of that poor girl next door. The memory of the raw terror in her eyes sears him. That night he barely sleeps. Each time he dozes, nightmares of Samantha screaming for help jar him awake. By dawn, Ned decides that if the authorities won't act, he'll gather the proof they need. He's an old man with no detective experience, but he has a strong moral compass and enough sense to document suspicious behavior. If the Whites are indeed abusing Samantha, there must be ways to uncover it. Over breakfast, a lukewarm cup of coffee and burnt toast, he starts scribbling notes in a battered notebook, listing everything he's observed. The bruises, Samantha's fear, Lauren's tight-lipped expressions, Mike's excuses. It's not much, but it's a start. He leaves his house mid-morning, intending to approach some other neighbors for help, or at least see if they've noticed anything strange about the Whites. The crisp autumn air rustles the leaves overhead, and the sidewalk is strewn with gold and red foliage. Ned's feet crunch over them as he stops at the home of Mrs. Hernandez, an elderly widow who lives a few houses down. Mrs. Hernandez greets Ned politely, but when he mentions Samantha, She grows visibly uncomfortable. She's noticed how Samantha rarely speaks, sometimes looks disheveled, but she assumed that was normal teenage angst. I do hear raised voices sometimes, late at night, she admits, wringing her hands. But you know these walls are thin. It could be normal arguments. Ned presses gently. Have you ever noticed anything like bruises or screaming that sounded more than just arguments? She shakes her head sadly. No, not really. If I did, I might have said something sooner. I'm so sorry. I'll keep my ears open. Ned thanks her, disappointment sinking in. He visits 2 more neighbors, who respond similarly. Some have heard shouting, but none are ready to label it abuse. A couple mention that Mike has told them Samantha has emotional issues, painting her as a troublemaker. Clearly, the Whites have been carefully building a public image that frames Samantha as a difficult teen. Worse, no one wants to get involved. They seem reluctant to risk tension with the Whites, who present themselves as friendly people dedicated to providing a home for a needy foster child. Feeling disheartened, Ned returns home. He stands in his kitchen, the countertop bright with sunshine streaming through the window, and wonders if Samantha is locked in that basement this very moment. The thought enrages him. He checks his watch, trying to guess when Samantha might be allowed to go to school or step outside, but he can't be sure of her routine. Maybe Mike and Lauren drive her to school, controlling every aspect of her life. Ned resolves to talk to Samantha directly. He'll ask her if she can gather her own evidence. It's risky, but maybe they can photograph the bruises or record the verbal abuse. Later that afternoon, he sees Lauren's car pull out of their driveway. Mike is likely inside the house working. He's some sort of IT consultant who mostly stays home. Figuring it might be the only chance, Ned creeps over and knocks on the White's door. His heart thumps in his chest, a swirl of nerves. After a long moment, Samantha cracks the door open, looking startled and fearful. Samantha, Ned whispers. I just want to help. Her eyes dart around, checking for Mike. He's in his office, she whispers back, voice shaky. He doesn't know I came to the door. Ned nods, lowering his voice. Listen, I'm going to keep trying to get you out of here, but we need something more concrete. Do you think you can record them? Take photos of your bruises? Anything to show the police what's really going on? She pales. He'll kill me if he finds out. Please be careful, Ned says. I don't want you to put yourself in more danger, but if there's a way, maybe you could keep a diary or something, or use the camera on your phone. She bites her lip, glancing inside. I'll try, she manages. I have to go. If he sees me talking to you... Ned steps back, feeling powerless. Stay strong, he says softly. I won't stop until you're safe. She closes the door, and Ned retreats, heart pounding with the sense that he's just placed a heavy burden on her shoulders. But what choice do they have? The system demands evidence, and a frightened teenage girl often can't stand on her word alone if the foster parents deny everything. He can't barge in with a camera himself. That night, he calls the local child protective services, hoping they'll accelerate their investigation. He ends up on hold multiple times, transferred to different agents who give him the same line. We take these allegations seriously, but we need to conduct a thorough assessment. We'll send a caseworker out soon. Soon, though, might be too late for Samantha. Days pass. Each afternoon, Ned peeks out the window, hoping to catch sight of Samantha. Sometimes he sees her from a distance, shoulders slumped, heading to or from the car. She never looks in his direction if Mike or Lauren is present. It's clear she's treading on thin ice. At one point, she limps slightly, which makes Ned suspect of fresh punishment. The fury in his chest simmers, fueling him to keep digging for any clue or ally. A week into his personal crusade, Ned calls an old friend, Carol, who used to be a child psychologist. She's in her 70s now, retired, living in a nearby town. Carol listens to his account, her voice steady. I've dealt with kids like Samantha, she says. The fosters who do it for the money can sometimes be neglectful, but this sounds worse than that. It sounds like systematic abuse. The challenge is proving it. Ned rubs his brow, leaning over the kitchen table. Yes, that's the problem. Samantha is terrified. The police want more proof, and the neighbors are either scared or have seen nothing. I don't know what else to do. Carol's tone grows more resolute. Well, you're on the right track by encouraging her to document anything she can. I can also talk to some colleagues who might have encountered the whites before. Sometimes abusers leave a trail of problem fosters behind them. Ned's heart lifts. That would be fantastic. Anything that helps paint a picture of their pattern. They exchange more details, and Ned thanks her profusely. The next day, Carol calls back with a lead. The whites apparently had a prior foster child, a teenage boy named Toby, who was placed with them for less than 6 months before being moved elsewhere due to behavior issues. Carol managed to get Toby's contact information from an old coworker who thought Toby might be open to discussing his experience. This is precisely the kind of lead Ned hoped for. If Toby also suffered or witnessed abuse, his testimony could reinforce Samantha's claims. Ned calls Toby that same evening. Toby, who's around 19 now, picks up with a guarded hello. He's working a part-time job at a gas station while finishing up high school credits. When Ned explains who he is and why he's calling, Toby hesitates. I don't want trouble, Toby says, wariness evident in his voice. I'm finally out of the system, living on my own. I can't go back to all that drama. Ned's voice shakes with urgency. Toby, there's a girl in that same house, going through what you went through, maybe worse. She needs help. There's a long pause. They told everyone I was the problem, Toby finally says, bitterness cutting through each word. Said I was violent or something. But they were the violent ones. Mike would lock me in this dank crawlspace if he thought I stepped out of line. Once, Lauren slapped me so hard my ear rang for days. Ned closes his eyes, anger thrumming in his veins. Then you know how serious this is. Please, Toby. Will you talk to the police? Or Child Protective Services? Tell them what you experienced. We need more voices so they stop brushing this off. Toby sighs. I guess I can, but do you think they'll really listen this time? I tried telling my caseworker back then, but Mike and Lauren lied so well. Ned's tone is firm. We'll make them listen. I won't let Samantha fall through the cracks. Toby relents. All right, let me know what I need to do. They exchange contact information, and Ned's spirits lift slightly. If Toby's story aligns with Samantha's, authorities might see a pattern of abuse, forcing them to act. Ned calls Carol, relaying the development, and Carol wholeheartedly agrees that Toby's account could be the turning point. She offers to help prepare Toby for making a statement, maybe coach him so he can be clear and credible. Ned then places a call to the local police again, providing Toby's information and urging them to interview him about the whites. The officer on the other end, not the same ones who visited originally, listens politely but offers no guarantee. That's helpful, the officer says. We'll look into it. But we'll still need immediate proof that the girl is in danger. Is Toby's testimony not enough? Testimony about past events may not be sufficient to remove Samantha right now, the officer explains. But it'll help build a case. I promise we'll do our best. Ned hangs up, frustration returning. It's a race against time, and the bureaucratic gears are grinding far too slowly. Each day Samantha remains in that house is another opportunity for Mike and Lauren to inflict more harm. He can only hope that Toby's involvement will speed up the process. Over the next few days, Ned notices a flurry of visitors at the White's house, possibly social workers or investigators. He can't see them clearly, but from his window he observes suits and briefcases. He can't help feeling relieved that the system is beginning to respond. Still, he sees no indication that Samantha is being removed. One afternoon, he glimpses her trudging up the driveway with a backpack, Lauren trailing behind. There's no outward sign that anything is different. Then, late one night as Ned is about to turn in, he hears a timid knock at his back door. Alarmed, he rushes to open it. Samantha stands there, eyes swollen from crying, arms wrapped around her middle. I snuck out, she whispers. I can't do this anymore. He's been locking me in the basement again, all because I answered back when he told me to skip dinner. Ned ushers her in, heart pounding. Okay, you're safe here, he murmurs, but panic twists his gut. If the Whites discover she's missing, they'll surely come looking. Are you all right? Are you hurt? She shows him more bruises, this time on her shoulder and torso. Ned feels sick. That's it, He growls under his breath. I'm calling the police again right now. Samantha's eyes widen with fear. What if they make me go back? I can't face that again. He presses her hand reassuringly. We have Toby now. We've got your bruises documented. We have enough to force them to do something. She's shaking from hunger or fear, probably both. Ned rummages in the kitchen for leftovers, quickly heating some soup. Samantha eats it ravenously, tears sliding down her cheeks. Ned calls the police station, this time demanding to speak with someone who can act immediately. He describes Samantha's fresh bruises, the fact that she just fled the home, Toby's upcoming statement. The dispatcher sounds more alarmed. She promises to send an officer to Ned's house within the hour. Ned breathes a sigh of relief. It's going to be okay, he tells Samantha, though he's not entirely sure. They can't ignore us now. When the officer arrives, Ned is surprised to see it's Officer Grace again, the same woman who first came by. She steps into the living room, her gaze landing on Samantha's bruises with a visible grimace. Okay, Grace says softly, let's get you photographed and taken to a hospital for a checkup. This might be enough to place you elsewhere, Samantha. You won't have to go back there tonight. Samantha collapses onto the couch, tears of relief streaming down her face. Ned can't help but feel a surge of hope. Maybe this is finally the moment the authorities take Samantha's account seriously. Grace calls for backup, instructing a colleague to pick up Mike and Lauren White for questioning. Samantha trembles as she overhears, but Ned assures her that once the system sees these bruises up close, there's no way they'll brush her aside again. 2 more officers arrive. They speak kindly to Samantha, gather her statements, take photos. Before they leave, Grace advises Ned that Child Protective Services may place Samantha in a short-term shelter while the investigation proceeds. Ned glances at Samantha, who looks stricken by the thought of a shelter. Can't she stay here with me? He blurts. I mean, at least until this is sorted out. I'm her neighbor. I have the space. Grace frowns apologetically. Technically, you're not a licensed foster caretaker. It might be complicated, but you can put in a request. It'll be up to CPS. Samantha looks up at Ned with a flicker of hope, but the officers explain it could take time for that to be approved, if at all. For now, Samantha will be placed under protective custody. She nods, resigned. Anything is better than returning to the Whites. So, with Ned's reassurance, Samantha leaves with the officers, trembling but relieved. Ned stands on his porch, the street lamp casting a halo of light around him, watching as the cruiser drives off into the night. For the first time in days, he feels a small spark of triumph. She's out of that house, at least for tonight. The next day, Ned learns that Mike and Lauren White were questioned at the station and vehemently denied the accusations. They insist Samantha is self-harming or that she staged these bruises for attention. However, Child Protective Services has opened a formal case and assigned a caseworker named Ms. Pollard to investigate. Toby's statement becomes critical as well. Ms. Pollard contacts Ned, scheduling a meeting at his home to discuss what he knows. When Ms. Pollard arrives, she's a brisk woman in her 40s, wearing a no-nonsense suit and carrying a leather folder. She thanks Ned for his cooperation, then interviews him extensively about Samantha's account, Toby's experiences, and every detail he's observed. Ned provides Toby's contact info, urging Ms. Pollard to speak with him. Her expression remains measured, but Ned senses genuine concern behind her professional demeanor. A few days later, Toby calls Ned, sounding both anxious and relieved. I spoke to that caseworker, Toby says. She asked me all kinds of questions. I told her everything. She seemed to believe me. Ned's shoulders relax. That's good news. Maybe now they'll see the pattern. Toby hesitates. She also asked me if I'd be willing to testify if this goes to court. I said yes, though the idea terrifies me. Ned feels a pang of guilt for dragging Toby into this, but he's grateful. Thank you. Really, Toby, you could save Samantha's life. Still, despite the statements and evidence, the legal process drags on. Meanwhile, the Whites are released without charges. They return to their home, outraged. Ned can feel their angry glares whenever he steps outside to retrieve his mail. One afternoon, Mike storms across the lawn toward Ned's front porch, his face twisted with rage. "You," he snarls at Ned. "You've been filling that girl's head with lies. Who do you think you are, meddling in our family affairs?" Ned straightens, heart pounding. "I think I'm someone who refuses to let a child be abused." Mike scoffs. "Abuse? Show me evidence." "You can't, because there isn't any." He jabs a finger in Ned's direction. "You're going to regret this, old man. You're slandering us and we're going to sue you." Lauren stands on their driveway, arms folded, glaring at Ned. Ned holds his ground, refusing to be intimidated. "Go ahead," he says. "I'm not afraid of your threats." Mike storms back to his property, and Ned trembles once he's inside. He hates confrontation, but he's determined not to show weakness. At least Samantha is no longer living there, though he's worried the Whites might hamper the investigation by forging evidence or leaning on their polished public persona. In the days that follow, Ms. Pollard visits Ned again, explaining that Samantha is currently in a temporary group home while authorities decide on a permanent arrangement. Samantha is receiving counseling and medical care. Ned's relieved to hear she's safe, but the group home is a far cry from a loving environment. Ms. Pollard inquires whether Ned would consider applying to become a licensed foster parent for Samantha. "Absolutely," Ned says, surprising even himself with the force of his response. "If it means giving her a stable home, I'll do whatever it takes." Ms. Pollard's eyes glimmer with relief. "It won't be a simple process, but if she's willing and you're able, it might be the best outcome. For now, there's a hearing scheduled in 2 weeks to determine if the Whites should lose their foster license and face criminal charges. Samantha may need to testify." Ned nods, his stomach twisting at the thought of Samantha facing her abusers in court. But he knows it has to be done. The hearing could be the deciding factor in removing the Whites from the foster system, and hopefully, punishing them for the harm they've caused. He promises Ms. Pollard he'll be ready to support Samantha in any way necessary. As the date of the hearing nears, Ned receives a call from Samantha. It's the first time he's heard her voice since she left that night with the police. She sounds timid, yet there's a hopeful edge to her words. "The caseworker said you might be my foster dad. Is that true?" Ned's heart squeezes. "I'd like that if you're comfortable with it," he says. "I don't want you to go anywhere you don't feel safe or welcome." She sniffles, the crackle of the phone line amplifying her emotion. "Thank you. Thank you for everything. I'm nervous about court." Ned swallows. "I know, kiddo. It's going to be hard. But Toby will be there and I'll be there. Ms. Pollard believes you, and so does Carol, and so do the police. You're not alone." She's quiet for a moment. "I was so scared no one would believe me." Ned's chest tightens. "I believe you, Samantha. And soon, a judge will too." They exchange a few more words before hanging up. Ned remains standing in his living room, phone in hand, feeling a surge of determination. If Samantha can muster the courage to speak out, he can do everything in his power to ensure her voice is heard. Toby stops by one evening with Carol to discuss the upcoming hearing. Carol explains that Samantha will likely need to testify under oath. The Whites' attorney might try to discredit her by labeling her a rebellious teen with a history of lying. Toby, too, may be subject to cross-examination about his own past, which included some minor run-ins with the law after he ran away from the Whites. But Toby is resolute. "I'm not letting them get away with it," he says, fists clenched. "I don't care what they say about me." Ned is touched by Toby's resolve. He can see the remnants of trauma in the young man's eyes, but Toby's fueled by a desire to protect someone else from the same fate. Carol coaches them both on what to expect in a hearing of this nature. She offers strategies for staying calm under questioning, for recounting the abuse in a clear, chronological manner. Ned scribbles pages of notes, wanting to do everything right. The tension in the neighborhood rises. Most neighbors have heard rumors about an upcoming trial. Some of them are sympathetic but hesitant to openly support Ned for fear of tangling with the Whites' potential lawsuit. The local grapevine teems with speculation. Did Samantha lie? Are the Whites the real victims here? Ned tries to ignore it, focusing on preparing for the hearing. Carol emphasizes the emotional toll it will take on Samantha. She'll need reassurance, both before and after, Carol says firmly. Ned silently vows to provide it. Finally, The day arrives. Early in the morning, Ned dresses in a modest suit he used to wear to church. He hasn't worn it in years, and it smells faintly of mothballs. Toby meets him at his house, wearing a thrift store blazer and jeans. They drive downtown to the family court building, a beige concrete structure that looms unimpressively against the skyline. Inside, the corridors are packed with people waiting for hearings of all kinds: custody disputes, adoption processes, juvenile issues. The hum of voices sets Ned's nerves on edge. They find Miss Pollard in a small waiting area. She greets them politely, telling them Samantha is with a counselor to help her prepare. A few minutes later, Samantha appears, escorted by a social worker from the group home. She looks tired but determined, dressed in a conservative blouse and skirt. She smiles weakly upon seeing Ned, stepping forward for a quick, awkward hug. The moment moves Ned deeply. He can sense her vulnerability, but also her courage in standing tall today. Before they enter the courtroom, Ms. Pollard quietly explains that this hearing is to address the petition for child abuse, which could result in immediate revocation of the Whites' foster license and possibly criminal charges. The Whites themselves are already inside, accompanied by their attorney. Ned's stomach churns as he envisions their smug faces. Toby sets his jaw, scanning the hallway for them. At last, the bailiff announces the case. Everyone files into a modest hearing room with rows of chairs, a judge's bench at the front, and a table for each side. The Whites sit with their attorney, looking well-dressed and composed. Lauren dabs her eyes theatrically, as though she's the one who's been victimized. Mike carries himself with righteous indignation, occasionally glaring at Toby or Ned. Samantha, Toby, and Ms. Pollard take seats near the front, along with a representative from the district attorney's office who is prosecuting on behalf of the state. The judge enters, a middle-aged woman with stern features. She reviews the documents quickly, then begins the hearing by asking the DA to present the state's case. The DA summarizes the allegations: systematic physical and emotional abuse, neglect, starvation, and malicious punishment, citing Toby's prior experiences to establish a pattern. Samantha watches, her face taut, hands clenched in her lap. Ned sits behind her, resisting the urge to place a comforting hand on her shoulder. He can feel the tension radiating off her. The Whites' attorney objects to nearly everything, insisting that Samantha is troubled. Toby is an ex-foster with a grudge, and no one can definitively prove the bruises weren't self-inflicted or accidental. He paints a picture of the Whites as benevolent caretakers who have tirelessly attempted to help at-risk teens. Lauren sniffles on cue, wiping her eyes, while Mike gazes at the judge with wounded pride. The judge then calls witnesses. Samantha is the first. She rises, her knees visibly shaking, and steps up to the witness stand. After being sworn in, she begins to describe her experiences: being locked in the basement, denied meals, shoved, and berated. Her voice trembles, but she presses on. The Whites' attorney attempts to interrupt, but the judge allows Samantha to finish her account. Lauren shakes her head in theatrical disbelief, mouthing "That's not true" repeatedly. Mike stares daggers at Samantha, and Ned wants to stand up and shield her from that glare. When the defense attorney cross-examines, he tries to poke holes in Samantha's story. Why didn't you call 911 earlier? Why didn't you tell teachers at school? Samantha shrinks at these questions, ashamed or frightened. But she manages to explain that Mike had confiscated her phone and that she feared no one would believe her anyway. Ned's heart clenches with empathy. She's essentially being blamed for her own helplessness. Next, Toby testifies. He recounts his own time in the Whites' home, detailing the manipulative tactics, the way Lauren would gaslight him by telling him he was worthless, the time Mike physically assaulted him for failing to do chores to his satisfaction. Toby's voice quivers with anger. The Whites' attorney tries to discredit him by referencing Toby's minor delinquency records. Toby fires back. "Yeah, I got in trouble after living with them, because they messed me up. Doesn't make their abuse any less real." The judge regards Toby carefully, apparently weighing his sincerity. Then Ms. Pollard testifies about the photos of Samantha's bruises, medical reports indicating injuries consistent with inflicted harm rather than random accidents. She mentions how the Whites' accounts changed every time they were asked about specifics. The DA presents Toby's prior case file, which includes notes from a social worker who had concerns about the Whites' discipline methods but no conclusive evidence at the time. Throughout it all, Mike and Lauren remain in a veneer of calm, shaking their heads, whispering to their attorney. Finally, after hours of testimony, the DA rests. The Whites' attorney calls Lauren and Mike to testify in their own defense. Lauren delivers a tearful monologue about their desire to help foster children, insisting Samantha and Toby are lying. Mike tries to claim Samantha bruised herself to get attention. It's all delivered with a polished sincerity that could fool someone who hasn't seen Samantha's terror firsthand. Closing arguments follow. The DA pleads with the court to remove Samantha immediately and file criminal charges. The Whites' attorney demands that the petition be dismissed as an vicious fabrication. Then the courtroom falls silent, awaiting the judge's decision. Samantha trembles at the table, Toby holds his breath, and Ned's hands are clasped so tightly his knuckles are white. The judge takes a few minutes to review her notes. At last, she delivers her ruling, speaking in a firm, clear voice. Based on the testimony and evidence presented, I find that Mike and Lauren White engaged in a pattern of abuse and neglect. Their foster license is hereby revoked, effective immediately. Furthermore, I am recommending that the district attorney pursue criminal charges for child abuse, endangerment, and any other relevant statutes. Lauren gasps, sinking into her chair. Mike's face hardens with barely restrained fury. Samantha's shoulders slump in relief, tears rolling down her cheeks. Toby releases a shaky sigh, and Ned feels a wave of triumph and gratitude wash over him, almost strong enough to bring him to tears. The judge continues, instructing Samantha's caseworker to secure a safe placement for her and stating that a criminal trial date will be set for Mike and Lauren to face formal charges. With that, the gavel falls, and the hearing concludes. In the bustling swirl of people leaving the courtroom, Samantha stands there, dazed. Ned moves closer, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. She looks up at him with eyes brimming with tears. I can't believe it, she whispers. They believed me. Ned nods, his voice catching in his throat. They did. You were brave, Samantha. Toby steps over, giving her an encouraging nod. You did good. Really good. Samantha musters a small, shaky smile. Ms. Pollard appears, congratulating her on her courage and reminding her that the next step is to ensure she has a safe living arrangement. She glances at Ned. You're still interested in fostering her? Ned straightens. Yes, if Samantha wants that. Samantha looks at him, her voice barely audible. Yes, please. I want that. The next few weeks are a whirlwind of paperwork, home visits from CPS, background checks, and final arrangements. Mike and Lauren White are arrested and released on bail, awaiting their criminal trial. Meanwhile, Samantha moves into Ned's home on an emergency foster placement. It's an adjustment for both of them. Ned has lived alone for years, and Samantha has never known a stable parental figure. But they navigate it together, forging a tentative routine. Ned picks up groceries that Samantha likes, ensures she has her own room, and helps her enroll in a new therapy program recommended by Carol. At first, Samantha is skittish, jumping at noises in the house or apologizing excessively whenever she spills something. Ned tries his best to offer gentle reassurance. You're safe here, he repeats like a mantra. Some nights, she wakes up crying from nightmares of the basement or Mike's threatening shouts. Ned, though not used to parenting, does what comes naturally. He makes her a cup of warm milk, sits with her until she calms down, and reminds her she won't ever have to go back there. Slowly, she relaxes. She starts to smile more, even laughs sometimes when Ned shares stories from his Navy days or points out the silly antics of the neighborhood cat that roams the sidewalks. Toby visits occasionally, relieved to see Samantha safe and healing. He's dealing with his own emotional scars, but being able to help Samantha feels like closure for him. Carol stops by to check on both of them, occasionally bringing homemade pastries. She discreetly assesses Samantha's mental well-being, offering professional insights to Ned about how trauma can linger. Ned updates the local police and Ms. Pollard about Samantha's progress. The Whites' trial date is on the horizon, a moment that will likely bring more closure. Meanwhile, Samantha attends her counseling sessions, trying to process the anger, betrayal, and fear that had accumulated over her time in the Whites' home. She's also adjusting to a new school, where she tries to make friends without the shadow of her old life overshadowing everything. Ned helps her with homework, though he's often unsure about modern curriculum. They bond through that challenge, though, and Samantha seems to appreciate having an adult who genuinely wants her to succeed. Occasionally, Ned worries about retaliation from Mike or Lauren while they await trial. But Ms. Pollard assures him there's a restraining order preventing them from contacting Samantha. Some neighbors remain uneasy with Ned's involvement, worried about the negativity it might attract to their pristine street. But Ned no longer cares what anyone else thinks. Samantha's safety and well-being are all that matter. At last, the criminal trial begins. Ned is not required to testify. Toby does, and Samantha is prepared to, though her attorney suggests her initial testimony might suffice if the prosecutor can build a case from Toby's statement, the evidence of bruises, and various official reports. Ned accompanies Samantha to the courthouse on the first day of the proceedings anyway, to offer moral support. He can sense her anxiety, the memories of the last time she faced Mike and Lauren swirling in her mind. They haven't changed their tune. They still proclaim innocence, claiming they only used mild discipline for a rebellious child. But the evidence is much stronger now. Toby testifies with renewed conviction, detailing specific instances of abuse, even recalling nights he heard Lauren threaten Samantha before Toby was removed. Additional evidence emerges. Other prior fosters had complained, but their complaints were shelved due to the Whites' convincing denials. The prosecutor connects these threads into a damning narrative of consistent, cruel behavior. Defense attempts to shift the blame onto the fosters themselves, but in the face of so many matching accounts, the Whites' protestations ring hollow. After a week of testimonies and cross-examinations, the jury deliberates. Samantha and Ned wait in a quiet corridor, hearts thumping. Toby paces. The whites of his eyes are red from stress. They have to see the truth, Toby mutters. Ned just places a hand on his shoulder, comforting him with a silent nod. At last, the jury returns. They pronounce Mike and Lauren White guilty of multiple counts of child abuse and endangerment. Lauren bursts into loud sobs, while Mike stares blankly, shock etched into every line of his face. The judge revokes their bail, ordering them taken into custody immediately pending sentencing. Samantha watches as bailiffs escort the Whites out of the courtroom in handcuffs. She trembles, emotions colliding, relief, fear, and a profound sadness that a situation like this ever existed. Ned wraps an arm around her shoulders. "It's over," he murmurs, voice thick. "They won't hurt you or anyone else again." Toby stands by, eyes shining with a mixture of triumph and sorrow for what they all endured. The prosecutor approaches, offering them heartfelt thanks for their courage. Samantha simply nods, tears streaking her cheeks, words failing to capture her relief. In the weeks that follow, a sentence is handed down. Both Mike and Lauren receive prison time for their crimes. The local news covers the story, shining a light on the foster care system's failures and praising the bravery of foster children who come forward despite immense fear. Samantha, still living with Ned, avoids the news coverage, unwilling to relive the trauma. Instead, she focuses on the future, therapy, building a social life, and adjusting to a home where she can watch TV or rummage through the fridge without punishment. For Ned, life changes dramatically. He's gone from solitary days of quiet retirement to fathering a teen. At first, the bustle unsettles him. Doctor appointments, therapy sessions, permission slips. But he also feels a renewed sense of purpose. Late one afternoon, he finds Samantha curled up on the couch, reading a fantasy novel. He asks, "Interested in reading something else?" She glances up with a shrug, so he offers her some old adventure books from his Navy days, funny comics that made him laugh once. She cracks a hesitant smile, letting him know she's open to sharing even these small joys. She also confides in him about nightmares, about how some days she feels worthless. Ned gently insists that she matters, and that every bruise she endured was a reflection of the Whites' cruelty, not her own shortcoming. Slowly, he sees the spark in her eyes grow as she embraces her new freedom. Toby visits occasionally, often bringing pizza or new music he wants to share. Together, they form a peculiar, makeshift family that thrives on mutual understanding and empathy. By the time the new school year starts, Samantha's wounds, both physical and emotional, have begun to heal. She's still in therapy, but the nightmares come less frequently. She helps Ned in the garden, planting colorful flowers or learning how to prune the hydrangeas he treasures. She starts calling him Uncle Ned, a term of endearment that amuses him, though legally, he's her foster father now. The house echoes with more laughter than it has in years. Ms. Pollard visits periodically to check on Samantha's progress and Ned's suitability as a long-term guardian. Each time, she leaves with a satisfied smile, impressed by their bond. Carol also drops by, bringing her professional wisdom, noticing how Samantha's posture has changed, no longer hunched in fear, but more upright and confident. One crisp autumn evening, Samantha and Ned sit on the porch, sharing a warm mug of apple cider. Leaves swirl around them in shades of red and gold, and the sky shifts to a gentle twilight. Samantha gazes at the quiet street, then turns to Ned. "I never thought I could feel safe again," she says softly. Ned looks at her, his heart brimming with pride and affection. "You deserve to feel safe. You deserve every good thing in life." He sips his cider, the warmth spreading through him. "There's a long road ahead, but you're not alone on it." She nods, blinking back tears. "I know." A small smile plays on her lips. "I want to try joining the art club at school. Maybe painting or drawing could help me express stuff." Ned grins. "That sounds wonderful. Let me know what supplies you need. We can pick them up this weekend." She fiddles with the sleeve of her sweater. "Thank you," she whispers, her voice trembling with gratitude that words alone can't contain. They watch the sun dip below the rooftops, content in the moment, each in quiet awe of how far they've come. Samantha contemplates her new life, free from locked basements and withheld meals, free from bruises and fear. Ned contemplates fatherhood at his age, and how it has unexpectedly become the most meaningful chapter of his life. In the hush of that autumn evening, they share a peace that once seemed impossible. Over the next few months, Samantha's growth continues. She displays talent in drawing, creating intricate sketches that channel her lingering pain into art. Her therapist applauds the outlet, and Ned frames one of her pieces, a portrait of an open door leading into sunlight, and hangs it in the living room. Whenever visitors come, he proudly shows it off. Samantha blushes under the praise but beams with genuine happiness. The local community, once skeptical, begins to rally around Ned and Samantha after reading about the Whites' conviction in the paper. Some neighbors drop by with small gifts for Samantha, or just to express support. Mrs. Hernandez apologizes for not speaking up sooner. "If I'd listened more carefully to those arguments, maybe I could have helped," she laments. Samantha thanks her politely, not wishing to dwell on regrets. She's learning to look forward, to embrace new friendships, however cautious she might be. Meanwhile, Toby finalizes some community college applications, inspired by seeing Samantha find stability. He's determined to turn his life around completely. "Maybe I'll study social work," Toby jokes one day, half serious. "Help kids like me before they end up in places like that?" Samantha encourages him, seeing in Toby a kindred spirit who survived the Whites' cruelty. When the Whites' sentencing hearing arrives, Ned and Samantha attend for closure. They watch as the judge sentences Mike and Lauren to multiple years in prison. Lauren wails, claiming she was manipulated by Mike, while Mike stands expressionless. Samantha's hands shake, but Ned steadies her. The judge condemns their actions as a betrayal of the foster care system's trust, underscoring the long-term harm they inflicted. As the guards lead Mike and Lauren away, Samantha exhales a breath she seems to have been holding for months. "They can't hurt anyone else again," she murmurs, voice trembling. "Not for a long time." Ned walks her out of the courthouse, arm around her shoulders. She feels lighter, as if a great weight has slid from her shoulders. The days that follow are filled with a sense of finality. No more appeals or threats. The Whites' chapter in her life has closed. She throws herself into her art, her therapy, and her growing circle of new friends. She even invites a classmate over to Ned's house for a study session, her first real friend since she arrived in this neighborhood. Ned watches her blossom. The quiet tension in his home is replaced by a gentle hum of teenage life, music drifting from her room, the clack of pencils as she draws, laughter on phone calls with Toby. Sometimes, they watch old movies together, passing a bowl of popcorn, Samantha teasing Ned about his choices of black and white films. He jokes back, calling her kids in a playful tone that elicits an eye roll, but also a grin. One chilly winter evening, Samantha turns to Ned as they're setting the table for dinner. She clears her throat nervously. Dad? She blushes, caught in the slip. Would you mind if I start calling you Dad? Ned nearly drops the plate he's holding. Emotion wells up inside him. He's aware that he's never biologically been anyone's father, and he's well into his 60s now, but in this moment he feels a surge of warmth. I'd be honored, he manages to say, his voice catching. A shy smile breaks across Samantha's face. She sets down the forks and, in a quiet voice, says, "Thank you, Dad," as if testing the word out. They share a brief, tearful hug right there in the kitchen. It's a moment of raw, unspoken understanding. They've rescued each other from loneliness, forging a bond stronger than any official stamp on paper. Months later, as spring arrives, Samantha's adoption hearing is finalized. She officially becomes Samantha Palmer. The day they sign the documents, her eyes shine with tears, but these are tears of joy rather than sorrow. Toby attends, along with Carol, Ms. Pollard, and a few neighbors who grew to support them. It's a celebration, a testament to perseverance through pain and the triumph of love over cruelty. Samantha wears a simple white dress, holding Ned's hand as they sign the paperwork. The judge, a different one than before, congratulates them warmly. Outside the courthouse, Toby jokingly calls Ned Papa Ned, eliciting laughs all around. Samantha clings to her new dad's arm, exhaling relief. In the bright midday sun, they stand together, the future wide open, no longer tainted by the wife's looming shadow. That afternoon, Ned hosts a small gathering at his home. Carrot cake, sandwiches, and a chance for everyone to unwind. The living room, once the site of Samantha's tearful confessions, now buzzes with laughter. Carol admires Samantha's artwork, pinned up on the walls. Toby jokingly tells a story of how he once got locked out of a car he was supposed to be fueling at the gas station, making everyone chuckle. Ned stands in the corner, phone in hand, snapping pictures, memories he'll treasure. Samantha eventually slips onto the porch for some fresh air, and Ned follows. She gazes at the yard where Ned's hydrangeas are just beginning to show buds. She tilts her head at him, smiling softly. "Everything's changed, hasn't it?" she asks. Ned steps beside her, hands in his pockets. "Yes, it has. For the better." She inhales the scent of spring. "I still have nightmares sometimes," she admits. "But I know now that I'm safe. It's different, facing them without feeling trapped." Ned nods, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Healing isn't quick, but it's happening day by day. She leans her head against him for a brief moment, letting herself rest in that warmth. Then they return inside, joining the people who fought by their side: Carol, Toby, Miss Pollard, and a handful of neighbors who realize too late the darkness that once lurked next door. But now, the darkness has been replaced by light, anchored in the new life Samantha is building. In time, Samantha flourishes academically. She makes plans for college, possibly to pursue art therapy for trauma survivors. Ned couldn't be prouder. Carol jokes that Ned got more than he bargained for in retirement, but Ned only smiles. "I found a purpose," he says quietly, and Carol nods in understanding. Years may pass, but the echoes of those events remain. Samantha remains in therapy, coping with flashbacks and occasional bouts of fear, but she's surrounded by people who love and believe her. She's discovered her own voice, a resolute spirit that refused to be broken by cruelty. And in Ned, she's found a father who will champion her always, proving that family can be forged through empathy and choice rather than blood. In quiet evenings, they sometimes talk about how it all began, that day she stood on Ned's doorstep, bruised and trembling, stammering her plea. They reflect on the terror that once defined her existence and how a single act of compassion reshaped both their lives. It's a reminder that, at times, all it takes is one person to stand up and say enough. Enough secrets, enough abuse, enough silence. As Samantha's 18th birthday approaches, they plan a small party. Toby, now in community college, volunteers to decorate. Carol brings her homemade pastries. Ms. Pollard, no longer Samantha's official caseworker, still attends out of friendship. The house is filled with laughter. Samantha opens presents, smiling from ear to ear. She cuts the cake, ignoring the faint tremor in her hands. This is her day, free from fear. Ned stands behind her, marveling at how different she is from that frightened girl who once knocked on his door. Now, she's self-assured, polite but assertive, and undeniably ready to take on the world. After everyone leaves, Ned and Samantha sit among the scattered gift wrappings, contented exhaustion on their faces. He asks if she has any birthday wish left. She thinks for a moment, then says, "I wish every kid stuck in a bad foster situation could find someone who listens, someone who takes them seriously. Just like you listen to me." Ned's eyes glisten. "I hope so too," he says softly. "And you know you can be that someone for others, if you choose." She nods. "Maybe someday." She glances around the cozy living room. "I've been so lucky to find a home after everything." Ned reaches over, taking her hand. "You're not just lucky. You're brave." She smiles. "Thanks, Dad." As the house quiets down, Ned closes his eyes for a moment, reflecting on the journey they've traveled. The neighborly illusion of the Whites' perfect home was shattered, unveiling horrors no child should endure. Yet out of that darkness, Samantha found a new path, guided by those who believed her story. He wonders how many more Samanthas are out there, waiting for someone to trust them, to see behind the masks their abusers wear. It's a sobering thought, but also a call to empathy. Each time Ned sees Samantha laugh, share a new painting, or open up about her dreams, he knows that their fight was worth every moment of uncertainty, every sleepless night. And he knows that, together, they've proven the power of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. Life goes on, the seasons shift, and Samantha's confidence continues to grow. She enrolls in a local college with a partial scholarship for the arts. Ned helps her pack up her supplies, brimming with pride as she takes on this new challenge. On move-in day, Toby swings by with a used but functional laptop, a gift for her classes. Carol arrives with a heartfelt letter containing advice for campus life. Ms. Pollard sends a congratulatory note, reminding Samantha how far she's come. The campus is only half an hour away, so she can still come home on weekends. Before leaving, Samantha hugs Ned tightly in front of her dorm. "You saved my life," she whispers, voice thick with emotion. Ned shakes his head, tears pricking his eyes. "No, Samantha. You saved your own life, by being brave enough to speak up. I just did what was right. I'm proud of you. Now go conquer college." She grins and, with a wave, heads inside to begin this fresh chapter. Ned watches her go, heart full. As he drives home in his old sedan, the seat next to him empty now, he ponders how empty his life would be if he'd ignored that timid knock. He imagines the alternative, a Samantha who never found the courage to seek help, who remained unseen behind the Whites' closed doors. The thought chills him. He arrives back on Oakwood Lane, noticing the house next door is still vacant, the for sale sign out front a silent monument to the darkness that once lurked behind its walls. Somehow, it feels fitting that no one has bought it yet. The entire neighborhood was rattled by the truth revealed in that tidy home. Maybe the sight of the for sale sign is a reminder. Abuse can be hidden behind the most polished facade, and it takes vigilance and compassion to uproot it. Ned stands in his yard, looking at the boundary line between the two houses. A gentle breeze rustles the trees. Where once he felt a sense of normalcy, he now feels a deeper awareness of the fragile nature of safety. He goes inside, tidies up the living room, and notices Samantha's painting on the wall. It depicts a closed door with light shining around the edges, as if to say there's always hope beyond the darkness. He lingers there, letting the image settle in his mind. He may live alone now that Samantha's at school, but their bond endures. She'll be back on weekends, or he can drive up to the campus if she needs him. They've forged a family out of heartbreak, a bond that no prison sentence or ephemeral rumor can break. That evening, Ned calls Samantha's cell phone to check on her. She's unpacking, sounding breathless but excited. "Dad, my roommate seems nice, and there's an art club that meets every Thursday," she gushes. Her tone brims with an innocence and joy that make Ned chuckle with relief. For a moment, they chat about mundane things, meal plans, campus orientation, like any other parent and child might. After they hang up, Ned meanders into the kitchen, microwaves some leftovers, and contemplates how a single spark of courage can ignite a chain reaction that changes lives forever. Long after dinner, he settles in the living room with a good book. But instead of reading, he finds himself thinking about the basement Samantha described, the night she fled, and the look in her eyes when she first begged for help. That memory will never fade. Yet now it stands as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. He glances at the painting on the wall once more, the door with the glowing light. Samantha's own life is that light, shining despite every attempt to snuff it out. He smiles to himself, flips open the book, and allows his mind a rare moment of calm. The next day will bring new challenges, new errands, new ways to support Samantha from afar. He'll be there, always ready to answer the phone if she needs a listening ear, or a ride home, or simply the reassurance that she's never alone. For all the heartbreak and injustice they endured, they emerged stronger, forging a family that stands as proof that love and courage can triumph over cruelty. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed the story, give this video a like if you haven't already and subscribe for more.